The Eagles have allowed the most points on this slate to opposing tight ends, 17.3 DraftKings points per game, 14 touchdowns on the year to opposing tight ends. I mean, what else do you need from me to say play
Sounds like
Rob
Gronk
Gronk?
Day.
I mean, this is the ultimate
Yeah.
Gronk spot. All right, let's look at some props for this game. Going over to PrizePicks.com, checking out NFL. Remember to check out PrizePicks. Use code Gundacker. They will double your first deposit up to $100. Looking at the Raider side, some of the most prevalent props on the board. Derek Carr, 240.5 passing yards, 4.5 rushing yards, 15 FanDuel fantasy points. I actually have them for 15, or I have him for 17.8. And if you agree with the game script that Vegas kind of lays out with the total and implied totals for both teams, Derek Carr playing from behind, 15 seems really soft, and you might be able to get there pretty quickly with a pair of touchdowns. So I kind of lean that over 15. Darren Waller at 5 receptions. And we just talked about how on the season, the Bengals have been the second worst team in this weekend's slate of games against the tight end position. And we know Darren Waller, if he's at 100% full health, ready to go, probably gets 10 targets. So if I had to grab 2 picks from the Raider side, I'm going to go Derek Carr over fantasy points and Darren Waller over 5 receptions. How do you feel about those two?
First off, I like those two. I think they make a lot of sense, especially the Derek Carr at 15 fantasy points. That seems slightly disrespectful. I mean, the guy's averaging right around 18 fantasy points per game. This should be a plus matchup as well, given it has a 48-point implied total. Yeah, definitely agree with you there. Something I had my eye on, first and foremost, it was the Hunter Renfrow under 5.5 receptions. You know, as much as I think he'll be a target hog, like you said before, they love spreading around. So to say that he's going to get over 6 receptions seems a little bit aggressive. Something I also had my eye on was Bryan Edwards over 2 receptions. That seems just a little bit low. Like you said, he's asserted himself towards the end of this year. So I thought both of those were a little bit off.
Yeah, and Zay Jones at 4-2, considering his recent volume,
Yep.
parlayed with 9 fantasy points. All right, on the other side here, Bengals. Props from the Bengals for this game. Joe Burrow, 255.5 passing yards, 7.5 rushing yards, 19 fantasy points, over half interception. Nothing there I feel like I'm getting a great deal on. Maybe the passing yards is something. They didn't give us a touchdown prop for him. Joe Mixon's at 71.5 rushing yards, 18 fantasy points as his score. That's kind of high enough that I probably don't deal with. Looking at Jamar Chase, they have him at half a receiving touchdown. I think I'd take the over on that. Looking for 1 receiving touchdown for Chase. We know Burrow loves him some Jamar Chase, especially linking up in the end zone. And you think about with everything on the line, there's so much chemistry baked in for the last couple of years between Burrow and Jamar Chase that I think I can give it that. Jamar Chase, 14 targets inside the 20 this year, 6 inside the 10, and represents 23% of the team's red zone targets. So I guess give me Jamar Chase over half a touchdown. And that's it. I think the Bengals are pretty pricey when it comes to props. Maybe you get a little bit of leeway on receptions between Chase, Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. But I think my favorite by far is going to be Jamar Chase for a touchdown. What are you thinking on the Bengals side?
Yeah, so my favorite from the Bengals as of right now is going to be the over on Tyler Boyd, 39.5 receiving yards. That's really the only one I think that you get any value on. You could try and sprinkle shot the under on one of those other props because I think they are all a little bit inflated. At least if you take a look at them individually, they look fine individually. That's what I meant to say. But if you take a look at them as a whole, they're not all going to hit their overs. I mean, they're all pretty set. They're set up there pretty aggressively, especially on the fantasy score side. But definitely like that Tyler Boyd prop. That's something that I would use individually, not when trying to correlate anything.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
If Bill Belichick does one thing well, is he takes away your best asset. He'll do that to pretty much any team he plays against. Doesn't matter whether that's a number 1 running back, your number 1 wide receiver. Gronkowski, when he played the Buccaneers, he took him away. He's going to take away your safety blanket. And
Hmm.
for the Buffalo Bills, there's no doubt that's Stephon Diggs. So could be looking at a long night, a lot of double coverage out there. So I like going under on some of his props and fading him for pretty much every contest.
So let's say he does that, right? Let's say he's able to shut down Stephon Diggs, and it's panic mode for the Bills. 41 and a half rushing yards for Josh Allen.
Okay, I can see that.
63, 81, 64. He's hit it the last 3 weeks, including a game against the Patriots where he scored 33, where the team scored 33. I don't mind hitting the over on that 41 and a half rushing yards, especially considering what's at stake, right? You don't just you throw the ball away a little less, and you tuck and run a little bit more, especially a guy like Allen, which that makes him so much more dangerous. So good spot to capitalize there. Devin Singletary for 1 touchdown.
That seems about right, honestly. I mean, he's the number one back now. Is being utilized as a wide receiver. A prop I really think stands out, I think that it's glaringly wrong, is Emmanuel Sanders, 22 and a half receiving yards.
Okay.
Seems like a mistake.
You like? Oh shoot!
The over on that for sure.
Man, you like the over? All right. I clicked. I typed in Sanders and it brought up Miles Sanders. I was like, wait a minute.
Oh, Miles Sanders, he's the bane in my existence.
I can't stand Eagles running backs. All right, so we like Emmanuel Sanders over. You said 22 and a half receiving yards.
For sure, because he's being priced at least via PrizePicks right now like he's the number 4 wide receiver, which isn't the case. He's going to be starting ahead of Gabriel Davis. If they really want to play Gabriel Davis, the guy that's going to go to the bench is Cole Beasley. It's not going to be Emmanuel Sanders.
The Eagles side, we've got Jalen Hurts, 187 and a half passing yards, 45 and a half rushing yards, 17 fantasy points. Remember, this is FanDuel PrizePicks scoring. They do have PPR though in their receiver scoring, so something to keep in mind. I know we're so used to saying FanDuel scoring for NBA, but they do have PPR for receivers. Dallas Goedert is at 4 receptions as his OU, 12 and a half fantasy points, 49 and a half receiving yards. Feel like if we put the pressure on them, 2-possession underdog here, it's going to lean on the passing game. And we've just talked about Goddard leading the team in reception or targets. I think Goddard over 4 receptions looks like a pretty solid look. He's gotten a shot at that. The Giants game, it was a complete laugher in favor of the Eagles. That's not going to happen here. More often than not, you're neutral to play from behind games for the Eagles. It's going to be throwing the ball a lot to Dallas Goedert. So I like Dallas Goedert over 4 receptions, almost snap call here. And then we have Gronk, 5 receptions, 15 fantasy points, and half a receiving touchdown. So I know touchdowns is very, very variable or high variance in NFL. It's probably the most variant part of the sport. But we just painted a pretty picture for tight ends against the Eagles, and we also talked about how the Eagles have allowed a ton of touchdowns to the tight end position all year. The most, maybe in the league, 14 total, the most that have made it to this weekend. So this seems like a really fun spot to look at Gronk as Brady's safety blanket in the end zone. So I guess I would get on Gronk over half a touchdown. You can make a case for receptions and fantasy score, but I like the receiving touchdown, him to get at least one. And then looking at Mike Evans, we didn't exhaust a lot of time talking about Mike Evans. It might be just because it's so obvious, but Mike Evans without anyone, 4.5 receptions. Come on, man. That seems like it's pretty light. If it's not Gronk, I think Evans leads the team in targets, and we could be talking about double-digit targets. Do you think 4.5 is a little disrespectful, and it just doesn't add up? How does Brady hit his 20 fantasy point projection if it's not through a lot of receptions on Evans and Gronk? So what do you think about Evans over 4.5 receptions and Gronk over half a touchdown?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how does Leonard Fournette have a higher prop for receptions than Mike Evans?
That's wild.
I mean, that's just that's disrespectful. I mean, there's no way around that. Yeah. So that actually might be one of my favorite plays I've seen on the board so far on the Mike Evans prop there. And what was the Gronk? It was that over half of a receiving touchdown.
Yeah, just
I like that
touchdown.
one as well.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
two
I
for me.
mean, I have Tom Brady at 3.1 touchdowns per game right now in the simulation, and again, one's going to go to Mike Evans, one's going to go to Gronk, and one to maybe one of those two again, or to one of these peripheral guys. I like that prop there, especially like the Mike Evans over on the receptions right there. That seems like a free square. That's about as close as it gets.
Murray has 35 and a half rushing yard prop. And if this was like week one, I feel like I would be smashing that without even like blinking. But in the last couple weeks, I guess in the last couple weeks, he's started to run a little bit more. And, you know, like I said it with Josh Allen, these games that mean more, you take off running. So I guess I think I do like Murray to take off running for 36 yards. So that's one that kind of sticks out early on. And then Zach Ertz, the other guy I'm kind of interested in. He has a fantasy score projection of 12. He's exceeded that in 3 of his last 4 games. And this game, like you said, with the total being what it is, one of the few games other than like the Dallas game that's indoors, climate controlled, a lot at stake. This is why you got Zach Ertz in the middle of the season. I like Zach Ertz over 12 fantasy points to go with Murray's rushing prop. Do you have a favorite pick or two for the Cardinals side of the PrizePicks props?
So yeah, I like the over on Kyler Murray, 18 fantasy points. Given that rushing upside that you were just talking about, he's going to go out there, probably give us at least 200 yards passing, a passing touchdown. He goes out, gets us an extra 4 to 5 points on the ground. I think he gets over that 18 fantasy point mark pretty easily.
And if we're going to load up on Matthew Stafford, 19 and a half fantasy points seems kind of low. 23 pass completions is interesting. Half an interception. He has shown a propensity to throw the ball to the wrong jersey a few times down the stretch, and maybe in the playoffs. A defense like the Cardinals might pick up on that. He's thrown an interception or more in 4 straight games, and only one of those games did he throw just one. But the most recent game that he didn't throw an interception, ironically, against these Arizona Cardinals. But I don't hate looking at potential pick. As a play here for Stafford on PrizePicks. What do you think about Stafford? 19 and a half fantasy points. And then Cooper is still jacked up price-wise. But like I said, this guy didn't just have the most incredible season ever for no reason. 8 receptions is still pretty attainable for what we might expect Cooper's role to be in this offense if they're going to make a run.
So yeah, I really like the over on Matthew Stafford's completions. They have him at 23 right now. I expect this to be a shootout. So if it's going to be a shootout, over 23 pass completions, that seems like a slam dunk to me. As of right now, I have him projected for 39 and a half, but 39.7 attempts. So, I mean, assuming he completes 65% of those, is on track to get the over there.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe the success of Akers would maybe pull down the run game a little bit, but yeah, there's a real path if the Cardinals limp into this game without one of their receivers and one of their running backs, and the guy that's left is a pass catching back. Yeah, I think this could be a higher paced game, and I agree with the shootout propensity here. So I'm in alignment with that. We really haven't disagreed much on many of these picks, and I like attacking these lines from a Friday night perspective. I'm interested to see if there's going to be any movement from some of my favorite calls here. So that's what we got on this one. Yeah.